All right, so this is one of our last two milestone review videos. So in this one, we're going to look at part one of our government review, looking at the foundation of the government, the legislative branch, and executive branch. So remember, Georgia, just like every state in this country, has their own constitution. And in Georgia's constitution, we have a preamble. And remember, the preamble pretty much just introduces why the document was written in the first place. We have 11 articles in our Constitution. Article 1 being one of the most important, which is the Bill of Rights, which basically tells you as citizens what your rights are in this country. I'm sorry, the state. And then the other ones outlined as far as the education system, the government systems, and all that. And then we have amendments in our Constitution, which pretty much anything that's not in the Constitution, we can add it to an amendment. Now, of course, our state constitution and the U.S. Constitution have a lot of things in common. So both of ours have a Bill of Rights. They're just in different areas. Both of our constitutions outline three branches of the government, and then they both have amendments and they both have a preamble. So to make sure the government runs smoothly, we have two different concepts we have in play. So separation of powers and checks and balances. So separation of powers means or allows each branch of government to pretty much have their own separate thing that they can do. So for example, the legislative branch is our General Assembly in Georgia, and it's broken up into two houses, the House and the Senate. Then you have the executive branch, which is operated by the governor and lieutenant governor. And then you have the judicial branch, which is operated by the Supreme Court justices. So we know the legislative branch make laws, executive enforces them, and then the judicial branch interprets them and makes sure they're constitutional. Checks and balances allows make sure that each branch of government does not overpower the other one. So, which in this case means that no branch can overstep the power of another branch, and that they can check each other in different ways. For example, the executive branch can veto a bill by the legislative branch. Now, the Georgia citizen, you have the right to bear arms, you have freedom of speech, right to a jury trial, right to a lawyer, and the right to fish and hunt wildlife as long as you follow the law. And then some of your responsibilities as a Georgia citizen is you must pay taxes, you must serve on juries, volunteer, and voting. Now, speaking of voting, to vote in Georgia, you must check all three boxes. You must be a U.S. citizen, you must be at least 18 on the election day, and you must be a legal resident of Georgia in the county you want to vote in. So remember, if you live in Fulton County, you cannot vote in the DeKalb County's election or vote in DeKalb County in a Georgia election. Now, the only way you can be disqualified from voting is if you're currently serving a felony conviction and or you're legally declared mentally incompetent. And remember, Georgia has three principles in which we abide by: wisdom, justice, and moderation. And each principle goes with a different branch of government. So there you are right there on the slide. Now, the legislative branch is our General Assembly, remember. It's a bicameral legislator. So it's a House of Representative and a Senate. And each chamber has their own different power. We'll talk about that in a minute. So to be a Congress member, you must check off one of the three boxes, or actually all three boxes. To be a House member, you must be at least 21 years old. To be a senator, you must be at least 25. For both, you must be a resident of the district you want to represent for at least 1 year, and you must be a U.S. citizen for both. Now, remember, each chamber, a House and a Senate member, they only serve 2 years in Congress before they have to come up for re-election. Now, of course, each chamber has their own role. So the Georgia Senate, they can introduce bills dealing with money, anything dealing with funding, and they can bring impeachment charges in the Senate. In the House, they're the ones who actually determine whether or not the impeached government official is guilty or innocent. And anybody the governor wants to hire or appoint, they have to approve or reject it. Now, both chambers of Congress, the House and the Senate, make laws. They propose the Georgia budget. They can bring amendments to the Constitution, and both of them work 40-day sessions starting June the second Monday in January. Now, remember, most of the work in the General Assembly takes place in committees. So remember, committees are where a group of legislators come together and study bills. So you have your standing committee and conference committee. So remember, your standing committee is basically your permanent committee. Those people never change, or those departments never change. So you have your education committee, policing, food, etc. So they look at any bills that want to get passed into laws. They make sure they're good. They vet them, change them, revise them, etc. Now, a conference committee is basically when the House and the Senate come up with the exact same bill, but you can't have the exact same bill from two different versions of the exact same bill from two different branches. So therefore, a conference committee is called to kind of pretty much make it one bill instead of two different bills. Now, we want to make a bill become a law. There are 5 steps we must go through. First of all, the bill has to be written. And then step 2, the bill is introduced on the floor in the House or the Senate. Then step 3 is that bill is assigned to a committee. And then once it comes out of committee, it goes to the floor of whatever house it originated in or chamber it originated in. And then it gets voted on by one chamber. Then it gets moved to the other side. They go through the whole process again. And then once it gets approved by both the House and the Senate, it is then sent to the governor. So remember, the governor can do 3 things when he gets that bill. He can sign it, veto it, or he can just do nothing and it automatically become a law. Now, part of checks and balances is the General Assembly can override a veto by a 2/3 majority vote. And of course, Georgia, money runs everything. So for the state of Georgia, most of the money that Georgia gets to pretty much fund a lot of things that it funds and spends money on, it gets the personal income tax, corporate tax, state lottery, and sales tax. And as we see in our little pie chart here, these are all the things that the state of Georgia spends money on. So remember, the 2 biggest things that Georgia spends money on is education and health and with like insurance and health and wellness stuff. Now, the executive branch, remember, the executive branch is ran by the governor and lieutenant governor, and our current governor, at least when this video is made, is Brian Kemp. So to be a governor and lieutenant governor, you must be at least 30 years old, you must be a U.S. citizen for 15 years, and you must be a Georgia resident for 6 years. So remember, both the governor and lieutenant governor are elected by the people. So the governor can both of them serve 4 years, but a governor can only serve 2 terms max, which means he can serve no more than 8 years. But the lieutenant governor can serve however long he wants to in the executive branch. Now, both of them have responsibilities. Some they share, some they don't. But the governor is the one that enforces the laws. He also is the one that signs the bill into law. He also appoints people to state agencies, which we'll talk about that in a minute. And the lieutenant governor's biggest role is he presides over the Senate. So he's the president of the Senate. So usually he makes sure the meetings are going well. He's a tiebreaker, all of that. All right, and then some of the agencies in the executive branch we talked about, we had a Secretary of State. So remember, the Secretary of State is the one that oversees elections. The Attorney General is pretty much the head lawyer or head legal officer for the state. So any cases that the state of Georgia brings charges against somebody on, or the GBI does, which is the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, the Attorney General handles. We have our Department of Education, which monitors school systems. Department of Insurance, which regulates insurance companies for fair rates and fraud. The Department of Agriculture, remember, they pretty much monitor food production, make sure everything's going right. And then the Department of Labor, which helps anybody that needs work, they deal with that, or unemployment issues. All right, pause the video, and then we'll start part 2.